Folks, I hope your day's going well, and if it isn't, it makes my job easier. Video games and Hollywood. The only combination in Uncharted space that has plagued the silver screen with more mediocrity than Jada Pinkett Smith's uterus. These two arts have had more filthy hands on them than Sasha Grey at a millipede orgy. Video games and movies are two of the greatest forms of fictional entertainment today, but you show me one Hollywood attempt to blend the two that doesn't blow for free, and I will show you one bold-faced frickin' liar, provided you have a mirror handy, and it's not just for lack of trying. Every major studio, from Universal to 20th Century Fox to Warner Brothers to Paramount to New Line Cinema to even the cash grab kings at Disney, have cast their seed into the wombs of both industries, yet I can count on exactly 5 fingers the number of films generated from them that are worth expending the amount of calories required to operate your DVD player remote. When you start to read between the lines, it's still one of the most head-scratchingly baffling things in all of existence. Here we have video games and film, two major commercial industries that consistently print money, yet attempts to blend the two usually results in rolling snake eyes. Now, I've mentioned to you guys before, in passing, that I am an aspiring filmmaker. In fact, I'm currently in the process of working on a script. And I primarily want to work in the realm of video game films. Now, we all know that there are a number of different video games out there that we would like to see get made into movies. It's just a matter of finding the right studio, getting the right property first, then finding the right studio, producer, writers, and directors to get on top of it. Personally, I believe that instead of just being another gamer sitting on his ass griping about why no good video game movies are being made, or why virtually no good video game movies have ever been made, should I become a director, I wish to get up off my fat ass and make them myself. So, folks, I am going to give to you right now my personal list of the top 10 video games that I, Chris the Liberty Gamer, would like to adapt into live-action films. Please bear in mind that the first 4 of these would have to be remakes, because the initial film that came out was either terrible or stuck in the guilty pleasure zone. Also bear in mind that the games on this list aren't on this list because they're popular. They're on this list because I feel that these games have stories and concepts that could and would translate well into film. And hopefully, despite my ham-fisted explanation as to why I think they could be turned into films, I hope you guys will understand my reasons and see eye to eye with me. You know, John Moore's 2008 adaptation of Max Payne, for me, is stuck somewhere between crap and the guilty pleasure zone. He didn't do a terrible job with it, but like so many other video game films, it felt like a missed opportunity. For my money, I would rather redo the film and create something that stays truer to Sam Lake's original material. The original Max Payne was essentially a character-driven John Woo heroic bloodshed-style game with a film noir atmosphere. Unfortunately, Moore seemed more concerned with focusing on the film noir aspect of the game and crafting a generic revenge story together than he did with actually adapting the multi-layered story of the game. So I would prefer to actually want to play it closer to the story of the game of a rogue undercover cop who's been framed for the murder of his friend and is being hunted by the mob, all the while he's trying to find the people who actually did murder his friend and had his family killed 3 years prior to the events of the story. Also, it's a story that makes for interesting character development and allows for a lot of great action. Lastly, I think the roles of Max Payne, Mona Sachs, and Jim Bavura were severely miscast. Look, Mark Wahlberg's a decent actor, but he's not the first guy that comes to mind when it comes to somebody who I think can sufficiently play the part of Max. For my money, I would have gone with either Colin Farrell or Christian Bale. For Mona Sachs, no contest, should have been Kate Beckinsale. And for Jim Bravura, I would have preferred to either go with Michael Douglas because of Black Rain, which reminds me, rest in peace Ken Takakura, we recently just lost him, or Gary Oldman because of his role as Jim Gordon in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Also because Gary Oldman's just a really good actor all around. It's certainly a more convincing actor than Ludacris. Anyway. Yeah, we all know Uwe Boll's video game movies suck harder than Megan Fox during Fleet Week, and while I don't consider Alone in the Dark to be his absolute worst, it still sucks. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, the only Alone in the Dark game I've actually played so far is the 5th one, this one here on my 360. However, I've checked out various videos concerning the first 3 games, and let's just say I feel that the 5th game is the one with a plot I could definitely use for a film. It would be good for the audience. Edward Carnby wakes up with amnesia. They don't know who Edward Carnby is, so they gradually get to learn along with him. Get behind him in his quest to remember who he is while trying to survive the ever-growing darkness present in New York City Central Park, and preventing the 7th seal from being broken. It's a story that allows for good psychological tension in the same manner of the original Silent Hill film, while providing the audience with some decent scares and bizarro, Guillermo del Toro-ish demonic beings, the likes of which we haven't seen since Ben the Looney last yawned in public. Plus, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to remake a movie, remake one that sucked. Discard it and make a better film. This is what I consider to be Uwe Boll's absolute worst. And yes, I know Far Cry was banality squared, and yes, I know Postal was mediocrity cubed, but Blood Rain was so bad that there aren't enough adjectives in the English language of which I can use to accurately describe how horrendous it was. Now, how to improve a terrible movie? For starters, let's reset the story in the 1930s like it originally was. The story of the game was initially about Rain, a Dhampir who is half human, half vampire, basically, who's been slaughtering her way through Europe in search of her vampire father so that she can kill him as vengeance for raping and eventually murdering her human mother. She's recruited by a secret society whose sole function is to protect mankind from anything that isn't human. Vampires, werewolves, zombies, demons, God only knows what else. And the secret society sends Rain on a mission to stop the Nazis from collecting a series of body parts required to resurrect some bizarro demon king or whatever. Yeah, there's not much of a plot, but the important thing is Rain's mission. And even more important than that, what she kills. The concept alone allows for enough narrative opportunity for violence and carnage against both guys in fully prosthetic suits and CGI monsters similar to the style of the Underworld movies. Enough chances to watch Rain kill untold assloads of body snatchers and whatnot using only her camel toe. Just as long as it doesn't look like some amateurish YouTube video put together by a bunch of 10-year-olds. But even that's an insult to 10-year-olds putting together amateurish YouTube videos. First off, I want to apologize for not having a physical copy available to show you guys. Pop quiz, Liberty Gamers. Was the general plot of the original Doom game too complicated to fashion together a sci-fi horror action movie without convoluting the story so badly it could pass itself off as Obama's healthcare bill? I didn't think so, because that's assuming the game actually had a friggin' plot in the first place. A space marine trapped on a space station on Mars that's been taken over by the forces of hell and must fight through the base and travel into hell itself to prevent these demons from using Mars as a vessel to invade Earth? What was difficult about that? Now, when it comes to redoing this one, I would prefer to play it closer to the story of Doom 3. Man is experimenting with teleportation technology and has inadvertently found a way to teleport into hell. Staff at the base have been suffering psychological breakdowns, and the lead science douche is apparently more concerned with advancing his research than the mental health of his peers. So the company funding the base on which these experiments are going sends their top members along with his personal guard to Mars to assess the situation when hell starts pouring in. And in between sessions of sending demons flying down dark corridors from a point-blank shotgun blast to the dong, we can dive into the mythology surrounding these demons and the humanoid beings that formerly occupied Mars and potentially spawned the human race. About the only thing I'd actually keep from the original movie is the effects of the BFG, and probably use more first-person shooter-style action. Audiences worldwide are certainly not strangers to international espionage thrillers, and I'm not just talking about James Bond, Mission Impossible, or Jason Bourne films. The story of the original Siphon Filter game was of a secret government agency tracking down a gang of terrorists who've been dispersing a lethal virus in various third-world European nations to test its potential as a biological weapon. And said gang of terrorists is planning to disperse said virus on a massive global scale. We've seen this done in one way or another on 24, Mission Impossible, James Bond, and Tom Clancy novels, the Splinter Cell games, and, well, a crap ton of other stuff. And while the formula has seen more use than a wet spot on Tommy Lee's sofa, the trick is in using the formula to reinvent it and give audiences an impression that they're seeing a type of film they haven't seen before. There's enough international intrigue, conspiracy-laden plot twists, and opportunities for great action and a handful of endearing characters to craft together a decent political action thriller that harkens back to The Hunt for Red October or the televised awesomeness that was 24.
I got the fever, I'm a junkie for the cash.
Ever since I got my original Xbox and first popped in a copy of Driver 3, I felt that the Driver franchise has long been in need of a film adaptation. We know the story's been done before. Undercover cop goes into a major criminal empire to bring it down, posing as a wheelman. We've seen this story done with The Fast and the Furious and various other films. Now, the Driver franchise is filled with a number of shadowy characters and is capable of telling a twisted and intriguing storyline while providing the audience with some good car action. Now, if it were up to me, my film would go with the story of the second game, where a numbers runner is selling out the Chicago mob to a Brazilian weapons smuggler, and our undercover wheelman Tanner has to work his way inside to prevent an international mob war from breaking out. I say this is the plot I would like to use because while the first Driver game was cool, it really was just a collection of excuses to get Tanner into a car. Of course, I would prefer to use as many practical effects with real car stunts, including doing the same thing that the Italian Job remake did, and assigning all the actors that were involved in high-speed car scenes to go through mandatory driving school so that they can do as much of the driving as they possibly can. I know this is most likely going to raise a few singular eyebrows, The Rock style, but hear me out on this, folks. The character of Duke Nukem is basically a parody of every single 80s action hero cliche. Big, buff, jarhead, sunglasses, over-exaggerated voice, endless one-liners, extremely patriotic, and able to use any weapon that the average person would barely be able to so much as pick up, let alone efficiently use in the midst of a firefight. Duke Nukem 3D was a game about one man up against a massive army of alien invaders that were stealing our women in order to impregnate them with their alien eggs while simultaneously trying to eradicate the rest of the human race. It's the perfect kind of shameless sausage fest that audiences would love to see. Think Guardians of the Galaxy with titty jokes. Now, I'm not too sure of who should play the title character. I know he looks a lot like Dolph Lundgren, but maybe we ought to go with a younger actor. What I do know is that I would like to use a combination of actors in suits and CGI creatures for the aliens, kind of like what they did with Doom. Except I would rather use aliens as opposed to some needlessly convoluted, man-made, extra chromosome BS. And first-person shooter sequences just for laughs. Another classic game that has long been in need of a film adaptation. Yes, we've seen monster movies before. Hell, we've seen movies that actually combine classic monsters and throw them in together inside of a fun blockbuster movie. See also 2003's Van Helsing. Castlevania is no different. The plot is bare bones at best and could do with a little expanding. Let's say a young, coming-of-age Simon Belmont learns that he descends from a long line of monster slayers, and the men in his family have had quite a few run-ins with Count Dracula. The infamous Count discovers Simon's existence, and in an attempt to sever the Belmont bloodline once and for all, he completely destroys the village that Simon and his family live in and kidnaps his wife. He then takes her to his castle, completely unaware that Simon is still alive and has infiltrated his castle with the sole intention of hacking, slashing, and yes, whipping his way through Dracula and his minions. While it would be impractical to use every single monster from the game. There are a select few we could throw in for Simon to whip to death. Medusa and her infamous flying heads, the Frankenstein monster with his little hunchback minion jumping all over the place like a jackrabbit with a jumper cable up its ass and being a complete annoyance. And hell, why not throw Death in there? Yes, folks, Simon Belmont versus Death himself in an epic duel that results in a significant amount of Dracula's castle just being completely decimated. Given that Death is a pain in the ass to beat in the game, why not? And then watch Simon gather up whatever strength he has left and destroy Dracula once and for all. Of course, with as little CGI as possible. And without the need to shoehorn zombie big army scenes in for no lucid reason, Dracula the Untold Story. No deep jokes, please! Right now, I'd rather not think about the filet-o-fail that was The Legend of Zelda, the animated series. Yes, The Legend of Zelda has a very skewed timeline that's more needlessly convoluted than the Resident Evil film series narrative. Yes, the games feature a metric assload and a half of dungeon crawling and extensive exploration. Yes, the protagonist is more mute than, I don't know, Al Sharpton in the face of the rampant black-on-black crime in Chicago, but moving on. While I can see that it is difficult to settle on exactly which game story to adapt, I think the best option would be to do an original story while working in various elements of the games themselves, a la Resident Evil. Only not make a film that can only be summarized as 90 minutes of glorified fanboy masturbation. Time traveling from Ocarina of Time, traversing between a light realm and a dark realm, a Link to the Past, diving a little into the mystery surrounding the Triforce and the fabled Hero of Time, so many of the different cultures that inhabit Hyrule. And there's so much I could throw in that one movie wouldn't be able to contain it all. We would probably be better off doing this as a trilogy, a la Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And to be honest, I could go on for hours about what I would do with a Zelda movie trilogy, but I don't want to run Angry Joe length here. Now, I had initially had this game as the last one on the list until somebody threw another suggestion for a Nintendo game translating into a live-action film, which brings us to...
We all live in a Pokemon world.
That's right, folks. Yes, this one did raise my eyebrow the Rock style, but, when I first glanced upon it, in the comment section of my Liberty Gamers message to Nintendo video in which I stated that it is way past time for Nintendo to start working with Jerry Bruckheimer and Disney on live-action film versions of Zelda and Metroid, a subscriber of mine by the name of Klontos proceeded to lay out his idea for a live-action Pokemon in the comment section, and I gotta be honest, I think he's onto something. Yes, I am well aware of the successful entries of anime films that have been pouring out since the late 90s, but let's just start from the beginning. Let's say our young trainer-to-be, for the sake of argument, let's just call him Red, has just received his very first Pokemon, that being Pikachu, and sets off to become a Pokemon master, encountering new friends and making a few enemies along the way with Team Rocket, constantly out to abduct the rarest Pokemon in existence. Now, in Klontos' little mini pitch, he made the suggestion to not make Red an emo baby, which, maybe throw in a little thing involving the absence of his father, but without making it too melodramatic, which I can go for. I don't know what it is with Hollywood films that think that every teenage character needs to be an unlikable emotional wreck. It's Hayden Christensen syndrome. But moving on. Of course, the Pokemon to be used should consist of the original 150, designed in a way that they retain some aspect of their original character designs while looking a bit more pronounced, a bit more semi-realistic. Of course, doing both animatronic and CG Pokemon, giving Charizard the look of a European dragon in ancient mythology, a more H.R. Geiger alien look for Mewtwo, majestic Harry Potter-esque designs for Pidgey and other assorted flying Pokemon, excess cuteness poured into Pikachu, Jigglypuff, and Eevee. I could go on for hours running down the list, but again, Angry Joe length. Also, just know that Pokemon is another one that could potentially run in a trilogy. Now, these aren't the only 10 games that I want to adapt into films, but they're the first 10 that came to mind, and I have plans to discuss my thoughts on film adaptation possibilities for even more games in the future. I want to know what you guys think out there in YouTube land. Do you agree with this list? Do you think there are some other reasons that these could potentially work as films that I didn't discuss? Do you think that there's no chance in hell of a good video game film adaptation ever coming out on the horizon? But, please, by all means, leave a comment, send a private message, like, favorite, subscribe, whatever you choose, and say, I am Chris the Liberty Gamer saying so long, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and have a good one.